The first of the input controls we're going to look at is called the text field. Before we look at it though, let's reconfigure our virtual devices. Go into Android Studio, open up your virtual device manager, and then open up your actual virtual device. Go ahead and click Show Advanced and make sure that Enable Keyboard is selected. This will allow you to type directly from your keyboard into the emulator. Once we have that in place, let's go ahead and begin typing. We want to make a variable and some functions. So we'll say string, and let's say void onChanged. Let's call it onChange. In here, we're just going to simply set state. And through the magic of copy and paste, we're going to make another one. So we simply have two functions that are going to set the state to change equal value or submit equal value. And let's set this to the value. Make a new text field. Notice how it doesn't suggest anything by default, it's just blank. That's what makes this a little bit confusing. If we go to our emulator, we just have something blank. Notice how we can type in it, but nothing's actually happening. So we're going to do this a little bit, I want to say on the hard side. There's an easier way of doing this. And let me explain. We're going to monitor the onChange and onSubmit, but there is this text editing controller which involves a different class. I'm going to do it the hard way where we monitor onChange and onSubmit so you can see what's happening under the hood. Alright, let's jump right into this. Let's change the decoration. We're going to say input decoration, and let's hit enter just to space this out so it's a little easier for us to read and work with here. And in the decoration, let's say label text, and we want to say hello. Now we want the hint text, and we're just say hint, and let's add an icon in here. And let's add the people icon, and let's switch back and look at this. Suddenly it says hello, there's an icon, and if we delete all that out, we have our hint text. The minute we start typing, the hint text goes away. That's a pretty powerful control right out of the gate here. So let's look at this a little bit more in depth. All right, we've got our decoration. Let's add autocorrect equal true. We want the built-in Android autocorrect to work. We want this to be autofocus, so it has the focus. What that means is the user can instantly start typing. They don't have to go in and click on it. Now, let's look at the keyboard type. We want the keyboard type in, let's say text input type. And let's see what sort of keyboard types we've got here. There's values, dates, times, emails, multi-line, number. For example, you can say number only. Save this. And notice how it's stuck in there. Let's actually reload the whole application. Maybe we need to do that. Restart in 690 milliseconds, and now we have a number keyboard instead of text. Let's switch this back to text. Hot reload still showing numbers, so let's do a full restart on the app. 724 milliseconds, we now have a QWERTY keyboard. Now, what we want to do is the interesting bit here, the onChanged and the onSubmit. Save that. Now, when we type, we can see whatever we're typing is actually in there. Notice how it switched to submit when I hit that little click button. Let's do that again. Hello world. The text is changing. It's being held in an internal buffer, and when we click this, we've actually submitted it. Now let's look at the checkbox. Checkbox actually has two controls, the checkbox and the checkbox list title. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Let's go ahead and explore these a little bit. So we're going to say bool value 1, and we're just going to give it an initial value of false. Bool value 2, initial value of false. And let's go ahead and make our functions here. We're going to say void let's fat over that into set state. All right, if you have no idea what that is, or if it looks like ancient Egyptian algebra, I highly encourage you to revisit Dart and learn some of the basics of Dart programming. This is one of the things that makes Dart really cool, is that you can just fat arrow things into a one-liner. So basically what's going on is we've omitted the brackets that everybody loves, and we're just using the fat arrows. So let's change that into value 2. So now we have our two values changed. Let's get rid of this guy here. And we want to do checkbox. Notice how it wants a value, so we're going to say value 1, and then it wants an on change. So we're going to say value 1 on changed. We don't have to do the brackets with the fat arrow and add a bool. It's actually done for us in the background. We just have to follow the function signature. So let's grab this. And I'll say new checklist box title. And we want the value 2 changed. Save this. Hot reload should take care of it. Notice how we have two checkboxes, and there's one over here and one over there. And because they have different values, they work independently of each other. If we were to give them the same value, they would work at the same time. That's state. So let's go ahead and switch this back to value 2, and let's explore what's really going on here. And let's knock these down a line just so we can really see what's going on. What's the difference between these two controls? Well, if you go into the checkbox, hit comma, control space, you can see there's not a whole lot there. Active color, key, and tri-state. However, on the checkbox list title, that's a mouthful, you can see there's a lot more. Title, control affinity, on and on and on. So let's play around with this a little bit here. Let's set the title, and we want the title to be a new text. Now, you should know we're saying new text, meaning we can put any type of control in there we want. We can even put a button. That's pretty cool. So now we have our title. Let's go ahead and say control affinity, and we'll say we want the list title control affinity to be leading. Save and run this and see what it's doing so far. Notice how it now says hello world, and it's over here instead of over there. And because we separated those values again, we have independent state. Let's explore this a little bit more. Let's make a subtitle. Subtitle is also a control. And let's add a secondary, and let's make this a new icon. Whenever you see the word new, not only are you creating a new widget, but to just think of the possibilities. You can add anything you want in there. And then let's make the active color. One thing I love about this IDE is it puts a little preview there so we can see exactly what we're going to get. You can see now we have an active color, we have text, we have subtitle, and we have an icon. And you notice how the whole thing is clickable. Whereas the checkbox, we can click around this, and unless you got really good precision, if you've got stubby little fingers like me, you're not going to get that. Whereas this, you just click, click, makes it real easy for the user. Nice, simple, and to the point. Now we're going to look at radios. No, I don't mean the AM/FM radio that's probably sitting on your desk. It's a control. Let's take a deep look at it. Now, radios can get a little complex here, so we need to set up an initial value. And let's set up another one as well. So we have value 1, value 2, because as you guessed it, there is a radio and a radio list tile, similar to what we had in checkboxes. So let's go ahead and set this up. And let's say void, let's call this set value 1. Wow, double spelling mistake there. Triple. All right, 3 times the charm. All right, let's go ahead and set our state. Let's fat arrow this into value 1 equal value. And let's just copy and paste this. All right, now, rather than adding our controls here, we're going to actually make some functions that return some controls. This is one of the really cool features of Flutter. You can do some really cool things like this. Let's say widget, and we want to make radios. Probably help if I type that correctly. Maybe that wasn't as cool as I had hoped. All right, let's try that again. Widget, make radios. All right, we're going to make a list. And let's just call this list equal new list. So we're going to return a column, something we haven't really talked about yet, and unfortunately it's got to kind of be towards the end of this whole tutorial because we're going to discuss layouts. But a column is, well, you guessed it, just a layout object. And we're going to return our list. Inside of the column. So what we're actually doing is we are returning, you guessed it, a list of widgets inside of a widget. Let's look at our hot reload. We got nothing in there and no errors. That's the important thing here. So let's go ahead and let's flesh this out a little bit. And let's say for int I equals 0, I less than, let's say 3. Let's increment that. Now we want to add. We're going to say list.add. And this is where the interesting bit comes in. We're going to say new radio. And I love autocomplete. I almost said autocorrect, because it just puts everything I need right in there. I'm going to say value 1. Notice how we have a group value, and this actually should be I, because that's the individual value. The group value is the group of controls, and you'll see that in just a second here. And let's set this to set value 1. Hot reload. Now we have radios. So what we've really done here is we've made a list. We have 3 of them. And as we select one, the others are deselected. So think of this as a list of values that you can select. So the first value will be 0, 1, and 2. So that's the radio. We're going to make radio tiles, grab this, throw this in here. we've got pretty much the same setup, but what we want to do now is, you guessed it, we want to add radio list tile. Very similar to how this is set up. That's one thing I love about Flutter. Let's give it a value, give it the group value. In this case, it's going to be our value 2. In the on change, we want the set value 2. Let's hot reload that, and you can see the difference. Notice how they're offset. And you can see when I hold down how it grays it. That is because it's the tile, not just the individual control. You can hear me clicking and nothing's happening, whereas it actually grabs it way over here. So let's go ahead and fill in some values for this. Let's set the active color, and we'll say colors.green. And once again, if you have no idea what to type, just hit Control-Shift on your keyboard, and it gives you a list of things that it's looking for here. For example, we could say control affinity.leading, which is what it's already in. We want the list tile, control affinity leading. We can change this to something different. Let's say trailing, just because, why not? And let's set the title. And we're going to make a new text. Remember, whenever you see new, it means you can put anything you want in there. And let's set the subtitle. Let's hot reload this. And everything works as expected. You can see we have the actual item number, and we've set the control affinity. Next, let's explore the switch widget. It's going to remind you a lot of the combo box. First thing we need to do, make some variables. Now that we've got those, let's go ahead and make our functions. We're just going to copy this. And change it around. All right, let's go ahead and remove this guy. Let's add a switch. Hot reloading didn't take place. Oh, there's the problem. There we go. Simple mistake. As you can see, switch just has an on and off. It's very similar to a checkbox. But along with the switch, we also have the switch list tile. Let's go ahead and break this out a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and add title here. And let's actually add a little style to this. And in our style, let's add the font weight. And we want this to be bold. And let's change the color. If that looks like gibberish to you, what you can really do is just kind of break this down a little bit. This is something I like to do just to make things a little easier to read. There. Now it may be a little easier for you to read. And you can also position your mouse over one of these brackets and you'll see exactly where it starts and stops. Hot reload, and as you can see, there's switch 1 and there's switch 2. And because this is a tile, it does the entire row, not just one little section. All right, in this video, we're going to cover the slider. Slider's a little bit unique, but it's actually really cool, and you've probably seen it 1,000 times. Let's go ahead and make our variable. We're going to make a double, and let's go ahead and make our function. Let's set this to private, just in case. And we're just simply setting the state. Now, this is where the interesting bit's really going to happen, right here in this text widget. We're going to say the value is, and then we want to print a value out. We've got to add some parentheses because we're going to actually create an object in memory here. And we're going to say value times 100, and we want to round that. Now, let's go ahead and add our slider. As you can see, initially it wants a value and an onChange. So we'll say value, and then let's say set value. Hot reload should take place, and here we go. It's pretty simple, just allows the user to select a range of numbers graphically using the slider. Note, if you didn't do round, you're going to have some interesting results here. Let's take that out just so you can see what it looks like. Suddenly, you've got a big double, and it looks kind of ugly. That's why we did the round. Let's go ahead and switch that back. Hot reload should catch up, and there we go. Back to a beautiful number. Now we're going to look at the date picker. This is a little bit more complex, so we got a little bit more code we got to work with here. First thing we need to do is import the async package. Next, let's go ahead and make our variable. And let's make our function. We want a future, and let's call this select date. And this is going to be asynchronous. Very important, do not forget the async keyword or you're going to have a very bad time with this tutorial. So we want datetime picked equal, and we're going to await the show date picker. Notice how we've got some stuff we got to work with here. We've got the context, the initial date, first date, and last date. These are pretty important because without them you can just kind of run crazy with this thing. So the context, we're just going to say we want this in our current context. The initial date, this is important. What date do we want initially picked? We're going to say new date time now. First date. This is the first date they're allowed to pick. We don't want the user going to the beginning of time. Remember, some of this code will be running on slower cell phones, and we want to make sure that those cell phones aren't going to die trying to generate a date. As crazy as that sounds, it does happen. Alright, so we're going to say the farthest back they can go is 2016. I'm currently recording this in 2018. And the last date, we'll say date time. We only want them to be able to go up to 2019. That way they're not going back to the beginning of time, and they're not going out to some weird crazy date like 3030 or something like that. Now we're going to say if picked is not null, then we want to actually set our state. Our state's just simply going to be the string value of the date we picked. Now, in here, we just simply want our value. And let's add a raise button. Let's go ahead and save this. Hot reloading should pick it up. Here's our date picker. Let's test this and try to go back to a really, really early date. You can see how suddenly we can't go earlier than January 2016 because our first date is 2016. And of course, if we were to go all the way out, a whole lot of clicking going on here, we can't go past January 1st, 2019. So our ranges are working. And our initial date is set. It is actually Thursday, April 5th, 2018. So I'm just going to select a date and hit OK. And there it is displayed.